properties. Gonna make sure this is fine. Okay. All right. You guys should be able to hear me now, I think. All right, great. Awesome. All right. So, what I was saying was we're going to take another 30 seconds to let people get in if we're going to have more people coming in. But we have Brandi in the building, 100 Devs alumni. If there's anybody here from 100 Devs, I'd love for you to say, hey, Code Baddies in the building, you know, all of that. Woo, 100 Devs, pickles for cats, what's up? Current 100 Devs, yeah, keep going. What part of 100 Devs are you on? Aleve Herrera. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
We love to hear it.
What? Okay, so can you see the comments, Brandi?
No.
Okay, so I don't know if I'm saying Ali Eve Herrera, I think. I'm not sure. But they are a PRN PT.
Oh, hey.
And they're doing 100 devs, so that's awesome. They just started the back end. Ooh, you're in the weeds now. You are in the weeds. Yup. That's when it started getting, well, JavaScript for me is when it started getting real because I'm not great at JavaScript. But when we got to the back end,
100% real from day one. But yeah, backend was a challenge that I think Code Baddies carried me through.
Yeah. Code Baddies. Oh, we got to talk about the Code Baddies today.
How can we not?
How can we not? Seriously. All right, everyone. We are actually going to go ahead and get started. As you can see, Brandi she was supposed to be joining me in my office here because she lives here now.
Hey.
But she's actually at happy hour in DC somewhere, right?
In Maryland, but you know, it's about the same thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
If you see me take a sneaky drink, it's fine. I'm not on the clock.
That's great. All right. Well, me and Brandi, just to give anyone who doesn't know about our story a little bit of background, Brandi and I did 100 devs together. I was an occupational therapist. I guess we still are therapists.
I'm licensed.
Right. We're still therapists, but at the time we were working therapists. I was an occupational therapist and Brandi was a physical therapist. And we met on Twitter, I believe. And there was a bunch of us early 2022, right? The golden days of Twitter when it was just so exciting to be there and it hadn't been taken over yet. There was a bunch of us in the cohort of 100 devs, and I just ended up making a group for us on Discord where we kind of met up and did silent studying together, which is also why I am starting the web accessibility study group in the same kind of vein of like getting people together to study and do it kind of live. It helped so much. I think we met every weekday at 10.
For a moment, yeah.
We
were every day.
Yeah.
I think before that, we did at least weekly.
Right.
We were like pulling each other through homework. And then when we got to serious code wars and early leak code, we were like, this needs to be every day.
Right. Once we got to the hunt, essentially, I guess it was the last like 2 months or so of 100 devs. And then beyond that, because then we were all still looking for jobs and doing leak code. We met almost every day for many hours, just trying to get our 100 hours project done, which is a really big project that 100 devs members do, which takes more than 100 hours, I'm pretty sure we put into that thing. But we'll talk a little bit more about what Brandi built. First, I want you to kind of just tell us about who you are, a little bit about your journey, and then we'll guide you through some questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think that you hit a lot of the high points. I started off as a physical therapist. I decided really, really early that I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I pursued that with sort of laser focus. And I got into it, and for a long time, I really loved it. And then I got very, very burnt out, and I had to think about what I would want to spend my time doing. And I found 100 devs. And the crazy thing about 100 devs for me is I did not feel like I was a very technical person. I didn't think that I was going to have a lot of skill in coding, but because of the way the program was set up, I was like, well, I can take a chance. I can try it out, and whatever works out, works out. Um, and I told myself I would try and get as far as I could, and here I am. I got the job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So why did you how did you find 100 devs? Why did you say, okay, this is, you know, a program that I want to try? But before that even, like what made you think, okay, physical therapy, now web development? What was that bridge?
So I actually in like March of 2021, I had an injury. I caught a patient who was about 300 pounds. Yeah, I caught them. Didn't he didn't end up falling, but I ended up having an injury from that. And at that point in time, I was like, I already know that I'm pushing burnout. I already know that this is something that I think I need to leave eventually. And with that injury, I was like, this is something I need to leave like yesterday. So I really started thinking about things that I thought that I might enjoy and that I might have skill at. And being an elder millennial, I went on Facebook and I asked my Facebook friends, like, if I wasn't a physical therapist, what do you see me doing? And I had these like ridiculous criteria like so ridiculous because like I'm a person, I'm like, I don't have any hustle, so like no sales jobs, no like I don't even know. I already have a doctorate degree. I don't want to spend more time getting education. Like, I know that I could, but I don't want
That
to
part.
do it. I don't want to spend the time. I've already paid off my student loans. I don't want to spend the money. Like, none of that. And a couple of times, like getting into computers or software came up, and I was like, well, I don't really think that I'm like, as I called it, I didn't have that like formal logic sort of thinking.
So do you consider yourself good at math at all?
No,
Okay.
terrible at math,
Right.
awful at arithmetic, but also just like not a mathy person.
Right.
I recently used ChatGPT to give me a formula on how to split my bills equitably. Like, I'll outsource the math when I can.
Yeah, why not?
Um, yeah. Uh, but my wife had also been in healthcare when we met, and then she got a CS degree. And she had actually started the very first 100 Devs cohort. And then she stopped when she got her own job. But she suggested that I try it out. And that was when I was like, okay, well, I'm doing this thing. I'm PRN, so I'm not really like committed to physical therapy. I don't have anything else lined up and I need something else lined up. I'll just like, I'll try it, see what happens.
Yeah.
And I kept that feeling all the way until my first interview. And then I was like, oh, shoot, I did it. What
Yeah.
is this?
Once you get to the interview phase, you're like, what the heck? I can interview at places. I know enough. This is actually what, that's when it became real. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah. So you're one of the few people who didn't get it through Reddit, which is funny.
Yeah, that's true.
So for those who don't know what PRN means, PRN is like per diem. So when rehab or healthcare professionals work PRN, we're pretty much working like a couple hours or however long they need us, pretty short term. And usually
I
often
compare
there's
it to
no,
substitute teaching.
yeah, it's like substitute teaching. Sometimes you don't get benefits, but you get paid a little bit more. It's just one of those things. You're kind of like a floater. So it's a little less stable, but it's very flexible because you are not beholden to come in usually. So that's what we mean when we talk about PRN. All right, so you decided to do 100 devs. You're like, all right, I have nothing to lose because it's free and it's online and it's at night, right? So there's so
Yeah.
many things that make it easy for you to get into. So you start doing it. And how did you feel about the program, like in the first half?
Um, Pretty excited, I think, was my whole thing. I'm a person who thinks a lot about like how you do things. So, like, if I'm taking classes, I'm thinking about like, how do people teach, or like what are the whys behind it. So I was very excited. There were a lot of like immediately tangible things that we were doing, and that was pretty cool and pretty exciting, even if I had to put so much time into it.
Yeah.
I felt like I was so slow. um, and then, yeah, I very much admired how the classes were structured and how we were moving through things. um, and I was a little bit surprised. It was the first time, I think, academically, that I was taking in information faster than I could digest it, which was an unusual experience for me.
Yeah. That's, I'd never thought about it the way you just said it, but I've talked about it in the way, like the thing that would happen when we were learning, because we were learning so many things, it's like you would learn it, and then 3 weeks later, after you built the whole thing too, you'd be like, oh, I get what this formula does. Like, I understand this concept now. I built the whole thing, a couple things, and now I'm like, it's like such a bizarre feeling, such a bizarre
Yeah,
feeling.
for sure.
Okay, so once you got halfway through, you have the latter half. So this is kind of when we hit like Java, like deep into JavaScript, and then the back end, and then we kind of have the hunt. So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about kind of working through going from front end to the back end, what you liked better, and then tell us a little bit about this hunt for a job.
Yeah. So I think I'm a back end person, if I had to say. Um, and while I really liked the sort of like tangibleness of like, I made this page purple, um, in a lot of ways, I think the organization and like manipulation of things on the back end made more sense to me, because while I could be like, yes, I made this purple, sometimes I'd be like, why is the purple bit way over there? Why can't I see my purple bit? Uh, so the front end is still somewhat a mystery to me. I also feel like I don't have a very good design sense, so I can look at something that I made and be like, it's not pretty, but I can't tell you like why or how to change it. So that's not so exciting.
Right.
Um, so I do think that I tend to gravitate more towards the back end, uh, or the like talking between. So to say, like APIs and stuff, or calls to other people's APIs, and like digesting that information is
Right.
something that I like a lot.
Yeah, and you were really good at it. We did a
Thank
few of
you.
those projects together, and
We
Brandi would kind
did.
of take over with trying to figure out the back end stuff that I was just confused about, and then I would kind of do the design part.
You'd make it
Uh,
beautiful.
I can make it beautiful, you can make it work. So I feel like that's great teamwork, if you ask me.
Yes.
Yes. All
We
right,
should
so
start our own
let
consulting.
let's talk about the actual hunt, because the
Oh,
hunt compared to, I mean, the program was insane. It was just a
yes.
whirlwind. We were learning so much, and then we got to the hunt, and the hunt is when I started losing hair and weight, probably. So how was it for you?
um, Early on, I felt fairly successful. And I don't know, I think at least part of it was just the timing of when we were doing things and when places were like laying people off. So my first like month, I had like two interviews and a solid lead. Um, and both of my interviews didn't get past second stage, which was disappointing, but reasonable. I didn't, think that I'd get it out the gate. And then hitting like December and January, it was just like crickets. There was nothing. I was, I was, I had already kind of like run through my network. I was doing all the things that I was supposed to do on LinkedIn, and it wasn't getting anything. I was warm applying, I was cold applying, and it was just like nothing. And that was really frustrating and really kind of disheartening. So I and life is life. Got bills to pay, so I was doing more physical therapy, which was hard because I was so deep in burnout. Then doing physical therapy, even though I was doing like half days, um, I was still feeling like super burnt out about it, and that was extremely hard. And then like being burnt out and tired from physical therapy meant that I didn't have the energy to like do the job hunting thing, and it was this like really hard to deal with cycle.
Right, right. So, I know we had the sheet, which is the sheet
Oh,
of all the
I was bad.
jobs.
Such a bad,
How
naughty
many
100 devser.
did you do? How many do you think you applied to?
Ah, I don't even want to calculate that because yeah,
More
I
than
I fell
50?
off it. Oh yeah,
More than 75?
yeah,
Like 100?
probably. There
150?
were probably somewhere between like 100 and 150. Yeah,
Okay, cuz same.
because yeah, I would say right,
It
like
was crazy.
I was probably getting like one or two like solid good applications out uh, a day, most days of the week for 7 months.
Wow. And of
Yeah,
those 125-ish, how many interviews did you get?
7.
7 interviews. Okay. So
Yes.
like a 3% success rate or something like that.
Yeah.
And that
Not
also
hot.
involved all of those coffee chats.
Yeah. So actually, it's kind of strange because I do think, other than the interview with Sierra 7, all of my interviews came from cold applies. I had, some warm leads, I had some references, and like those didn't go anywhere.
Right, right. I remember when we were all going through it together. I guess, I got a little bit lucky because instead of looking for software engineering jobs, once just kept getting rejected so much, I focused more on like web accessibility. But when we were going through it, I remember we were doing a lot of coffee chats and trying to get those warm connections and get connected to a job.
Yeah.
And it just felt like you would get the connection and then they would just like try you out and then end up getting someone else who has like way more experience, even though you told
Yeah.
them like, hey,
That's,
we don't have a lot of experience, and they'd be like,
yeah.
yeah, we're cool with that. So I feel like that happened a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know that you did a bunch of pickles for cats. Said, oh my gosh, my heart. Yes. I mean, this is the grind. This is the reality of, I think, where we're at right now in with tech. Like, if you don't have any experience on your resume and you're like a newbie, you can assume that you will probably put out like at least 100 of those applications. And I think we both did like 50% reaching out to people, 50% like just cold applying. And for both of us, it was kind of the cold applying that seemed to give us the most back. But tell us about how you got into web accessibility after all of that. Because throughout this whole
Well, I
thing,
have this really cool friend who had some passion about this thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course.
well, don't make it about me, make it about you.
Yeah. I mean, so I feel like in a lot of ways, though, our story is very similar. You might have been more in depth than me. Um, as a physical therapist, thinking about and problem solving for people who have different abilities is kind of just like who I am and what I do and what I've always done. So from day two, Leon was like, "Oh yeah, you can use this semantic HTML, and it's like just good practice, but also it makes it better for people who use screen readers." And it was like a throwaway comment, and I was like, "Ooh, wait, what?"
It was such a throwaway
Um,
comment because he only said it
Yeah.
like twice ever,
Yeah.
and then never came
Uh,
back to it. And I
Never
was
came back again. Um, so, or like, you know, I was reading all this material and, up on the MDN all the time. And it would come up that, you know, this is a way to do it, but here's a better practice. And it's a better practice because, so learning about like no carousels and getting a little bit crazy about hamburger menus. I definitely, I would come across these things and I'd be like, oh, that sounds important. Like, oh, I'm going to keep that in mind. So I do think that, you know, having that kind of mindset anyway opened me up to it, made me more in tune with it. And then, you did your 100 days of accessibility on Twitter somewhere. You
it
were
was on
around.
Twitter,
So I
yeah.
was reading your things. I was already like kind of connected into the accessibility Twitter space. So it just like, as I knew more, I learned more. And as I learned more, I knew more. And it feels like one of those things where it's like, once you know better, you need to do better.
Right,
So
right,
I started trying to make sure that I was including it wherever I could. I was making sure that I was hitting my stuff with keyboard commands and my stuff with my screen reader. I use VoiceOver because I'm on a Mac, it comes built in. Just trying to make sure that, stuff was there as
right,
much as I could.
right. So obviously, this is one of those cases in which having a network of some kind does help
Did work
because
out.
when I got my job, a job opening did happen to come up, and Brandi was looking for a job, and Brandi had already been doing web accessibility because I was annoying AF and
No,
talk about it all
that
the
is
time.
not what you should have thought of, gotten out of that.
Yeah, so because she already was, a physical therapist. Also, let's be real, the doctorate really does help. Like it does help a little bit. You came in mind when I was like, oh, maybe Brandi could apply for this, but in order to apply for it, how did you prepare yourself? Because for this job, they it was what is it again? Accessibility analyst is what we do. That's the name. They call it Section 508 auditor on some paperwork, and they call it all different names. But basically,
Yeah,
the work is
I stick with the auditor.
right. We're testing web pages and documents for
Yeah.
accessibility using the WCAG and Section 508 laws. So, what did you do to kind of prepare yourself for this interview that was coming up?
Yeah. So I had already kind of hit through the WCAG, so that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And in a kind of sporadic way where I was like, oh, I need to know about how I should, describe my links, or oh, I wonder about how I need to like make sure this video is embedded. Um, So I made sure to go through those in a bit more structured way, just to make sure that I kind of had a good understanding of what they were, what it looked like when something was good, what it looked like when something was not good. Um, which, by the way, is something that I think is missing in a lot of the resources for accessibility is kind of getting there's often a best practice presentation, but I don't think there's a like this is not good.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
um,
Literally, literally. But so Emma, okay, so Brandy's also
yes,
doing the
also that
the open source
the open
project
source.
where we're teaching developers basically step by step how to build accessible components. And one of I'm doing like the website copy, so writing the articles, some of it. a little portion of it. And one of the articles I did was on forms. And in the article that I wrote, I gave bad examples because I was like, I want to see bad examples. But then Emma was like, well, maybe we shouldn't be teaching people like not best practices. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. So I had to take
Oh,
it out.
I have an opinion on that. So in the like, oh, I think about things as I'm doing them. That's an example. Like while I was learning how to do good, I'm like, oh, how would I teach this better? I have heard it called like inoculation. So you give people a little bit of bad to protect them from the big bad. So in this case, we could show them what a bad form looks like, either from the front end user experience or from the coding experience, so that they can recognize it and like
Right.
not go into it.
Because the way that I wrote it at first was the way that I was writing it before I knew how to
Right.
build an accessible form. So I'm like, this is what a
Yeah.
lot of people are doing.
Yes.
But yeah, that's
Please also don't look at any of my forms that I put in a layout table.
oh yeah. Don't look at any of our stuff. We're like, web accessibility people, but we're still working on our own websites to make them accessible. Please don't judge us. We're trying,
Terrible.
okay? All right. So you didn't get the job actually.
I did not get the job.
Did not get the job. And you guys know why. If you were here with me yesterday, we were talking with Dorlin, who is my coworker, who I work directly with. Dorlin got the job over Brandi. And I gotta say,
Totally fair.
yeah,
Totally fair.
yes, because the person that you were replacing was a blind coworker. So I mean, it wasn't because she was blind; it was because she was blind, and she knew all the stuff like the back of her hand. She's so good. But even though Brandi didn't get the job the first time, another opening happened a couple months later. And because she interviewed already and she interviewed so well, they were like, obviously, we're going to take her. So tell us a little bit about your first couple months on the job, what you learned, and what you were kind of doing.
Yes. We will ignore the first 3 weeks where I sat on my hotspot and used up all my data and then couldn't do anything.
Yes, government jobs are, guys, they are something. I mean, they're great,
Yeah.
but slow to get started.
Slow to get started.
But you still get
Yeah.
paid though. It's kind of nice.
Hey. So one of the things that I actually was doing is I was working through the JAWS training material without having access to JAWS, the software, which
It's tough.
it was a thing to do.
Yeah.
It was very tough for me because it is very technical and very dry, but also I didn't have the software, so I couldn't be applying it. And I'm a person who I'm going to go through and I'm going to learn a thing by basically touching all the buttons and then touching them all again and then seeing what I can break and how I can get out of the broken parts. So not having that access was really difficult for me. But I was just took a deep breath. I told myself that it would be spaced repetition, that once I got my hands on it, it would help out, which seems to have been true. I'm feeling fairly good, more comfortable with JAWS than
And JAWS is
in
a screen reader for everyone who doesn't
Oh,
know.
I'm sorry to say that. I didn't. So that was a large part of my first bit, was getting the equipment, getting used to the software, and then also sort of, the processes and procedures of how to approach a formal editing, because with my own stuff there's no stakes, right? If I
Right.
get it wrong, like I get it wrong and I have it forever and ever. So if I learn something or if I realize something later is a problem, I can be like, oh hey,
I
go
am
back
so
and
sorry. Live stuff. Okay, it's pouring raining, and I have a bunch of stuff on my balcony. I'm just gonna pull it in real
Okay.
fast. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on.
I'll just keep talking. So, with my own stuff, it's that I can go back whenever. So I was just kind of following some outlines and some guidelines, things that were good to look at in whatever situation. So a large part of my learning for this job is how to kind of go through something in a formal way, making sure that I'm hitting everything and making sure that I'm not taking just downright forever to do it, because I get one chance at it and I better get all the things before I send it out to get hopefully fixed.
Right, exactly.
So that's I think about where I'm at now, is kind of like learning that process and working through that process. And uh, with the VA, we're covering basically anything they can put out on the internet or intranet, as I realized the other day. I know the difference, I promise. Um, so anything that they put out, we has to be compliant. So we're making sure that that's the case.
Right. So we're basically finding all the errors, writing the report, and then the developers get the report and they fix the stuff. And then if
One
they,
hopes.
what'd you say?
I said we hope.
Yes, a lot of times they don't fix anything, and then they give it back to us to re-audit, and we're like, "You broke it even further," which is always really fun. And I think it's funnier because we know how, like, we understand coding. A lot of the people that we work with, they are not web developers. They don't really have any formal training in that. So I think it's a lot more interesting to work with it, knowing how it could have broken. I think that's what makes it really fun. We're going to talk a little bit about tools and things that you find a lot as an accessibility auditor, but not to get in your business or anything, just like out of a light curiosity. When it came to like actually getting the job and transferring from physical therapy over to this web accessibility job, what, like, you don't have to tell me how much you make. I don't want to know the number, but like, are you making more money? Are you working harder? Are you working less? Like, tell me a little bit about that. I want to understand the difference, like your stress level, like what's up?
Yeah. So as a physical therapist, wages can vary significantly based on, setting and like location. I believe is one of the bigger ones. So even though I was a more experienced physical therapist when I moved from California to Pennsylvania, I entered a like pretty saturated market and I took a pretty significant pay cut. So right now I am making, as a 508 auditor, about what I made when I left California as a physical therapist. So it is a step up from what I was making in Pennsylvania, which is where I moved from.
Okay. So how about the stress level or the energy level of what you have to do versus
no stress? Actually, something that I said the other day that I noticed is I am getting praised a lot here. I'm getting told I'm appreciated. I'm getting told I'm doing a good job. I did not get this as a physical therapist. Even when I feel like I did a good job, nobody was like, especially not like in the formal work structure.
Right.
Like patients were like, "Great, I love you." I'm like, "Thanks."
Right. It was gratifying in that the patients were grateful, but then your boss would be yelling at you because you didn't meet your productivity.
Right. Or my documentation was, slightly not erroneous. Erroneous is the bad word. But like maybe not as in depth as they would like to see.
Right. I find it so
2 minutes to type it on an iPad.
Right. Ali Eve Herrera said, "Wow, we would love some positive affirmation. What's that like?" Right.
I'm certain that your documentation is as good as you can get it, and you're doing good things for your patients.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, you have that. It's really stressful working in that setting.
Yes.
And the thing that blows my mind now is exactly what you just said, which is like when I just do my job, I get praise, and I feel like I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm doing the bare minimum, but like compared to what I was doing when we were doing therapy, it feels like nothing. Like I'm like I just get on the computer and I like have fun and look at stuff and then get paid more money, and it's great. It's interesting. And even if I
Yeah.
didn't get paid more money, I would take a pay cut to do this for sure, I think. All right. So we have about 15 more minutes left. I want to spend a
Very cool.
little bit of time talking about some of the things that you see as a web accessibility auditor. Right now, I think you're doing websites. So you just started
I
websites.
am. Apparently, I am speed running the beginning.
Yes,
They
you
are.
are.
I had a I had a show and tell the other day, which is when you show off the problems to the team that made it. Uh, but usually that comes after several months, and I was asked to do mine on something that I didn't work on. I was standing in for somebody who had moved up in our organization. Uh, and so I did that the other day, which was okay. I don't have any problem public speaking, so I was fine with my part on it.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, so I've completed one web audit, and I'm in the weeds on two of them.
Um, I'm looking through some of my questions. All right. So what are some of the top three things that you see all the time when it comes to web accessibility?
Um, okay, so one of them is something that I'm absolutely guilty about because I have a hard time with it too. Is alt text. So I see a lot of just no alt text. I get graphic 3, um, which is problematic in its own way. But also, I see a lot of what I do, which is alt text on everything. So I'm learning to try to be a little bit more fine tuned on knowing what things are important to have described to people and
Right.
what things are just extra distracting information.
We call them decorative images.
Yeah.
Yep. It's kind of
So,
like weird how easy the concept of alt text is, but how complicated it can get with problem solving,
yeah.
how to write it, and what you should include. So it's like a whole flow
Yes.
chart that needs to be made, which I
Oof.
think that there is one. You Google it. Okay, so alt text. What else?
I'll text a lot. I would say like not informing people about what things are or what you're expecting them to do or what they're related to. So I see this a lot with links and
So
a lot with
labels.
buttons. Yeah, so labels to use the technical term. So it'll be we'll get just like edit, edit
Edit
what?
what?
What are we editing? Also, there are 4 edit buttons here, so
Right.
which one is this?
Right.
Or what does this form field belong to? What am I trying to put into it? Um, Related to that, using placeholder text like as a label is something that I've been seeing a lot.
Yeah. What else?
I would say I see the whole gamut, but I would say that those two things are the things that I see probably 50% of the time.
Right, right. Those are the
Yeah.
two. Okay. So what is your favorite thing about um like being a web accessibility auditor now? Like what do you love about
Yeah.
it?
Um, well, I always wanted to be helpful and to like help people. And so obviously like being a physical therapist, that's a hands-on helping.
Mhm.
Um, but when I wanted to step out of that, that was one of my big struggles was like deciding what sort of thing I could do that would have that help, like would like make a difference in a world. If I'm going to be, working at a bank, moving a button a pixel over, I'm not sure that I'm like really doing something helpful.
Right, right,
But I was willing to. I was
right.
like, I've had enough of this. I've done my fair share. Like maybe I do need to move a button a pixel.
I know. I know. That's so funny.
But it's real. I hear about people who have that job. Um, so, but like having this job, I'm like, oh, obviously I understand like what I'm doing and how it's helping somebody. Like I don't know who the person is, like physical therapy, I knew who I was helping. Um, so I don't know who they are, but I can see how I'm helping them, especially when I do get things back and they have made changes and I'm like, aha, yes, this is now better. My experience is better. Somebody else will have a better experience because of what I did and what they did, but what I did.
Yeah, it's like a dopamine hit every time you
Ah,
find something wrong. And then when you get it
yes.
back and it's actually fixed, you're just like, love it.
Yeah, yeah. And like the nice thing, I think, because I've heard some people make the argument about accessibility being like it can be detracting. Like if you're doing CSS art, like it's not really accessible. Uh so like you might detract on something. Whereas like some of the things that I've gotten back, I can't say that like as somebody who has vision or as somebody who has full cognitive capacities that I think this product is less than what I saw originally. So there are ways to make it so that it is actually an equivalent experience without taking away from one of the experiences.
Right, right. So I have a question that I like just am curious about, and then I'm gonna end it out. By the way, for those in the chat, oh, by the way, Old Man Felonious said, "Great chat, super topics. Thank you very much." Um, I lost my train of thought. Oh my goodness, it's the end of the
You had
day.
some
Been
you
auditing
had
all
something
day.
you were
Ugh.
curious about.
Okay, yes, I am curious, and then I wanted to also say, sorry, chat. If you have any questions, we're gonna end the conversation with answering some questions. So go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat if you have any, whether they be about 100 devs, web accessibility, or transitioning. We would love to answer some of your questions. But what I'm curious about, Brandi, is do you miss coding?
Do I miss coding? A little bit.
What do
A
you miss
little
about
bit.
it?
I have always really liked problem solving. Um, and that's what I used to try to sell as my like, the being a physical therapist and becoming a coder makes sense because physical therapy is all problem solving all the time.
Right.
At least the way I was doing it. Uh, so do you miss that like sitting on a problem and thinking about it for a while?
Mm-hmm.
I also miss sort of the whys of some things. So, I might find a problem and be like, well, but I wonder what's going on here. Like, they clearly made a choice. Why was this choice made? Like,
Right.
that sort of thing. So kind of just staying in my lane and like purely identifying the problems without trying to bring a like solution to the table can be really challenging for me. So I think that's probably what I miss the most out of it.
Right.
I'm going
Exact.
to block my mic a little bit. There's a sound check happening.
Oh. Um, I'm like losing my train of thought already. Okay, no, I remember now. One of the things that I think it's because we know how to code, so whenever we're doing the web pages, the main thing that just like kills me is when I see something, I really just want to know how they did it the way they did it. How did they get it to be so effed up? And then when they change it, I'm like, what did you do exactly to change it? Because we can kind of use an inspect tool and like look at it that way, but we're not going in the code base really. We're kind of visually looking at things. And that's really why I feel this drive to do that, like to learn about web accessibility engineering, the coding part, to at least understand how to build the components and like what a bad component would look like. Is that something like, are you doing anything on the side to learn a little bit more about it?
So I am kind of going back through my old projects. I did send you the original template if you wanted to look at that, but that's we're at 5 minutes.
I
I understand
know.
if we skip it. So I am kind of going back through my own old projects and trying to increase that, especially now that I have access to different uh, excessive tech or accessibility technology. Uh, so just kind of reviewing, learning a little bit more. But I can't say that I've coded anything particularly seriously uh, since getting the job. But that being said, I moved, I had a vacation, I'm working on my JAWS certification. Like, there's a
You
lot
got a
going
lot on
on
your plate
right now.
already.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, I ask everyone this at the end. I'm going to ask you like one more question, but I ask everyone this at the end. Will you, Brandi, please come hang out with us during one of the streams for the web accessibility study group? Like, can you be one of my co-streamers for 1 week?
We will talk about it at work.
What? You have to say yes right now.
I mean, I'm generally into the idea. That being said, video is not usually my preferred medium.
Okay.
But
You know what? That's fair. Will you hang out in the chat?
yes.
All right. I love it. Thank you. All right. So we do have some questions, but before we answer the questions, Brandi, I'm going to ask you, what advice would you give someone who wants to be a web accessibility specialist?
I think my advice for web accessibility specialists is going to be the same as my advice for getting into tech, which is having a group of people around you that help support you and grow you. Something community taught.
Right, right. So reaching out
Yeah.
to people who are already in the field and
Yeah.
creating a
Or people
community.
who are at the same like peer-to-peer level,
Right,
as much as possible. Having somebody support you through those things is really what got me over the finish line.
right. Is there any material or anything that was super helpful other than Google?
Well, my friend is this really cool person who did some streams, gave me her PowerPoints.
Well, I guess this one is, well, yeah, asking you this, you got it all from me kind of in a way, but yeah. Okay, so what do you want everyone leaving here to leave with, if anything?
I would like to think, and I said it, it's one of those things that as you know better, try and do better. Accessibility, I don't think is particularly scary or stressful. You just want to, include as many people as you can, as much as you can. So, as you learn something, go back to your old projects, go back to your old work, and try to make it just a little bit better. If you get 10% here and 10% there, it's going to make a big difference.
Right, right. I love that. Well, we're going to answer a few questions for the next 5-ish minutes, and then we're going to let Brandi enjoy her happy hour. But the first question is from Agribenia. They ask, is there a lot of web accessibility jobs out there?
I think that you might have a better answer on this than I do. I was not particularly targeting web accessibility jobs. That said, I do know that, obviously the government has a mandate that they have to have accessible things. However, the ADA and Section 508 applies across the board. Reasonable accommodations are a standard everywhere, and companies are getting in trouble for doing this. I know that Target recently had to settle a pretty big settlement for not being accessible in their websites. So if companies aren't accessible, if they're not developing and building with those things in mind, they're open up for a lot of liability. So I kind of get the idea that accessibility as a field is going to be growing.
Yeah, I'd have to definitely agree with that. Are there a lot of accessibility jobs? Accessibility, web accessibility in of itself is such a small niche that I wouldn't say that there's like a ton of jobs. However, if you are well qualified, you know your stuff, and you have a few certifications, and you're okay with working hybrid, there are jobs. I get messages on LinkedIn all the time for positions. There's a lot of positions for the government, for tech companies, and there's positions, a lot of them are in DC because of the government. So if you're like willing to move to DC to get your foot in the door, you'd probably find something if you do have like proof that you know what you're talking about. So it just depends. I would say there's enough jobs for a serious person who's targeting web accessibility and also knows how to code to get a job, yes. But if you're just like, you really gotta want it. Just like, with software engineering, you can't really fall into a software engineering job unless you're very lucky. You have to kind of prove that you know what you're talking about. So for those people, yeah, if you study this and you commit to it, you will find a job because no one knows how to do this. It's so niche that just knowing what it is and knowing what the WCAG is and understanding that alone, you can find a job, especially if you learn how to test and you learn the engineering side of it. All right, so we have another question. How did you each tailor your resumes for transitioning from rehab to web accessibility?
Awesome. Yeah. So I put a ton of emphasis on the fact that I am familiar with the ADA and ADA regulations, that I had actually assessed physical spaces. I had done home evaluations and looked into the sort of things that those require. And I put a lot of stress also on my problem solving and my familiarity with the things and my ability to learn pretty quickly.
Right. For myself, I listed out all of the web accessibility tools, all the screen readers, all the assistive technology, all of like a few certifications that I was working on. So I looked at the keywords of all the jobs, pretty much the description, and I would like kind of just put it in there. Especially if, obviously if I know it, then I'm putting it
I
in there.
did the same.
Right. And then for like my occupational therapy jobs, right? Because all of my jobs were occupational therapy jobs. And then I had 100 devs on there because 100 devs is a job. Let's be real. It's a work program. So I had that on there. And what I would do is each line, I emphasize what I did with accessibility there. So for 100 devs, I'd like put, worked with a team to like make sure things were accessible, and then all the other stuff we put. And then for occupational therapy, I put like did section 504 accommodations, physical accommodations, worked with assistive technology, worked with, just really highlighting how you're working with technology in some capacity, how you're working with people with disabilities, that's really important, and how you're advocating for and adjusting for accommodations and things like that. I think when you highlight that in all of your jobs, because that is what you're doing, it shows that you at least have a good understanding of accessibility, good understanding of disability, and things like that. We have one more question. Which is two questions, but I can answer the first one, which is, do you have a link to the background music that was playing in the beginning? I do not. That is literally a file that my friend sent me to use for my streams and my yoga videos.
So they have actually turned on the live music. I'm going to like walk.
Okay.
As you asked me this question, I'm going to turn off the screen so nobody gets motion sick.
Okay. The last question was, I haven't heard of 100 devs until this call. In a few sentences, what is it? Oh, 100 devs. 100 devs is a free online bootcamp that was, well, you can do it right now. It's all the videos for the 30 weeks are on YouTube. And basically Leon, the person who leads it, he leads us through a live cohort of Oh, nice background. He leads
Yeah.
us
Oh,
through
you can
like
see
week
all my
to
freckles.
So each week we learn full stack web development, and then we do a 100 hours project. We work with real people to build a website for them. And
It's how we
then
know
he
each other.
teaches us how to find a job. So it's a really comprehensive, free boot camp where a lot of people, and it's all online. So a lot of people found jobs through this. I think of our group, like half of us found a job, I would say, of the people
Yeah.
who were like,
Very
really in it to
serious.
win it.
Yeah.
Half of us found a job, which is incredible for a free, program. So that's what 100 devs is.
Yeah.
All right. I think that is all of the questions that we had. Brandi, thank you
Awesome.
so much for joining us during
Thank
your happy
you.
hour. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
thanks for being flexible on that and a
Yes, my
little flexible on
pleasure.
the start time.
Yes, yes, yes. So thank you everybody for joining us. This is actually the last coffee chat, the last one we're having. We may do a round 2 of coffee chats, not sure. But thank you for everyone who's been coming to these chats live and watching after. I really appreciate it. I hope that you've learned something. And I hope that this has brought you some value. So until next time, we'll see you for the Web Accessibility Study Group that starts September 19th-ish. We're going to be here on Tuesdays in between like 3 and 5-ish, learning 16 weeks of web accessibility engineering and fundamentals. So we'll see y'all then. Have a good one.
All right. Bye.